So last week I was at the MLB Winter Meetings in San Diego, and for those of you who are normal and have a life, the winter meetings are a lot of things, but I would consider it to be a convention, and the people convening come from all walks of baseball life: owners, executives, players, respected media members, disrespected YouTubers, and job seekers. Basically, people mingle and deals get done. This past winter meeting saw the signings of Trey Turner and Aaron Judge, for example. Now, this was my first trip to the winter meetings, mostly because they weren't held in person in 2020 due to COVID or in 2021 due to lockout. And for me, this was an opportunity to interact with people in real life that I typically only talk to through the internet. And in that regard, this trip was a total success. So I started my journey in Atlanta on Saturday, December 3rd, and arrived in San Diego that night. Weird thing about me, before this trip, I'd been to 17 different countries, but I'd never been to the west coast of the one I actually live in. The next day, Sunday, I went to the hotel and picked up my media credential. This was a big deal. I had successfully infiltrated the MLB Winter Meetings, and what this meant was I had access to a media workroom filled with free Diet Pepsi, which, considering I'm from the state of Georgia, might as well have been arsenic. One obvious highlight of my first winter meetings was definitely just the people watching. At any given time, you could stroll through the hotel lobby and see a familiar face. If you're a beat writer who interacts with players and managers frequently, the novelty of that probably isn't as great, but for me as someone who makes content without actually interacting with these people, it's a real joy. Just a small selection of people I saw hanging around the hotel bar at various times. Kim Ng, Kyle Tucker, Aaron Boone. In fact, I also saw Boone doing some TV work for Yes. The second floor was HQ for the various TV stations covering the meetings, and I went up there for a quick interview with Masson Orioles, which was a great time. Now, with enough people watching, you can get keyed into the social dynamics of the winter meetings, which are fascinating. I learned that the baseball industry is generally filled with good people, but it's definitely cliquey. And even though I don't often get to hang out with my peers face to face, I wasn't immune to that. Towards the end of the week, I was talking to Robert Murray, and I remarked that there was a very strong contingency of people basically our age doing big things in the media world. And that's the crowd I kind of fell in with. As far as people I was getting to know for the first time, it was folks like Robert and June Lee and Russ Dorsey, who I really enjoyed meeting after basically having no relationship with prior to the winter meetings. I've always despised and outright rejected the concept of networking. I'm an introvert, and I'm uncomfortable with any human interaction that has any sort of transactional element. If I had to schmooze my way into a more traditional baseball media job, I would have had no chance. Being a YouTuber was pretty much my only hope of becoming somebody in this industry, and it worked. And it gives me the freedom to be friends with people without any expectations. It was so interesting watching Jeff Passan in that regard because it seemed like everyone wanted a piece of him. I first met Jeff when I was walking aimlessly through the lobby on the first day, and I heard a voice echoing behind me, and it said, "Bailey!" And I turned around only to see him looking right at me. The winter meetings are a big deal for a newsbreaker, but I didn't envy his position at all. You could tell the week was taking a lot out of him, not just in terms of his obligations as a reporter, but also the social obligations that come with being the guy. That said, he is still my enemy, and if he has a moment of weakness, I will strike him down. I just won't feel good about it afterwards. Anyone familiar with our work probably isn't surprised that I'm good friends with the Cespedes Family Barbecue gang. I know Jake and Jordan well, and now I also know their producer Chris. One observation Jake had is that the winter meetings are important if you're a star reporter like Jeff Passan, or if you're a college kid trying to get a foot in the door. But for everyone in between, basically, people with established careers who aren't there to get the big scoop, it's kind of pointless. Which was totally true. I was basically just there to hang out, and I had a great time hanging out with people who I'd gotten to know through Twitter over the years, and this is one of those areas where I really got to see the fruits of my labor. It was my first winter meetings, and thus my first face-to-face time with these people, but we weren't strangers by any means, so it was really nice to chat with Craig Goldstein from Baseball Prospectus, and Bradford William Davis from Insider, and Fabian Ardaya from The Athletic, just to name a few. Fred McGriff was voted into the Hall of Fame via the committee while I was there. As a Braves fan, that of course warmed my heart, and he was in San Diego doing the press rounds shortly thereafter, including this scene from the media workroom. I must apologize for the sparseness of video footage. I'm not really a vlogger, I'm not comfortable talking to a camera in public, and I'm certainly not comfortable shoving that camera in other people's faces. My on-camera work was strong, though. Here I am making my MLB Network debut. At the time, I thought I'd found a nice quiet lunch spot on a sunny balcony, but it turns out I had an audience watching me scarf down a grilled chicken sandwich from the hotel cafe. In fact, I had a real knack for appearing in the background of things just by virtue of existing and being at the hotel for 14 hours a day. Here's the annual Scott Boras presser, and there's me. Here's Nelson Cruz, and yep, that's me. That Cruz photo was tweeted by Jon Heyman, whose arson judge to the Giants tweet was possibly the moment of the winter meetings. While you were all chortling from the comfort of your own homes, imagine being there and seeing Jon Heyman try to go about his business as if he didn't just make baseball history. The event I was looking forward to most was on the final day, and it didn't disappoint. I'm of course talking about the Rule 5 draft, a very weird exercise in which teams pick at minor league scraps to try and find major league gold. 15 players were selected in total, including my favorite pick, Ryan Noda, who was snatched from the Dodgers by the Oakland A's. But the real highlight, of course, is that many teams don't make a selection at all, which means the draft basically ends with a bunch of teams passing on their turn to pick.
Atlanta.
Heartbreaking.
Atlanta passes. Houston. Pass. Houston passes.
Not a winning organization.
Los
Not
Angeles
championship
Dodgers.
mentality.
Colorado passes. The Rockies pass. Chicago White Sox. Chicago White Sox pass. Baltimore. Orioles pass. Milwaukee. Milwaukee passes. Philadelphia. Phillies pass. San Diego.
One other Rule 5 highlight is that the Pirates tried to draft a player who was recently suspended for PEDs. The draft stopped for 5 minutes to discuss whether this was against the rules. Turns out it is. So instead, the Pirates, well...
Pirates pass. Cincinnati.
At the conclusion of the draft, J.J. Cooper of Baseball America, who probably knows more minor leaguers than I know human beings, came up to me and said he enjoyed my Greg Maddux video. This was a surprise and a delight. I'd long been a devotee of his work and in fact was reading his draft guide earlier that day, yet I didn't think for a moment that he knew who I was or was a fan of my edits. And given that the Rule 5 draft is his Super Bowl, it was as if Tom Brady came up to me after the big game, shook my hand and said, "Hi, I'm Tom." Yeah, I know. All in all, a perfectly good time. As I was exiting the hotel lobby for good, Jeff Passan asked me if I would be back next year, and I told him it was, 50-50. I don't regret the experience, but I don't think it's necessary for what I do. More just a fun way to remind myself that people on the baseball internet have a corporeal form and aren't just a string of ones and zeros on my smartphone. My final observation is that the job seekers, the college kids and the recent grads in suits trying to just get their foot in the door of the baseball industry were very courageous for being there. If I was in their position, I would have been utterly terrified to talk to anybody important, and a lot of them were, which is why they talked to me instead. Luckily, I love to infect the youth of America with my brainworms, so whether I ramble to you at the hotel bar or just through the device that you're watching this video on, I appreciate you listening to what I have to say.